This is TMS Roundtable Recovery, and my name is Dr. Tovah Goldfine, and every week we have been streaming live here. Thank you, universe. Thank you, internet. Thank you, all the things we've been learning. So I don't want to get into that right now. I want to introduce my co-host, Jeannie Colwyn, who I'm so excited to be rubbing shoulders with. I'm streaming from the Middle East. Jeannie's streaming from LA. And our guest tonight is Rachel Whitfield.
Yep.
From the UK. And
Correct.
If you don't love that accent, well, you better wait and hear this accent for the next hour because it's pretty strong. So I'm going to let Rachel talk in a minute. Let me just bring up her name. And there's a lot about Rachel that I want you to know. Let me just bring this up. Here she is. Rather than me read the bio, which I don't like to do, I like to just jump in and have Jeannie and I have a discussion, a dialogue with Rachel about her recovery story from long COVID. And there's a lot of other things about that will help the listeners. If you're not here to see this live, if you want to ask questions, start typing in the feed. We will answer them at some point. If you want to see this the next day, it'll be uploaded on my YouTube channel where you can also ask Rachel questions. We'll have her email there. You can talk to Jeannie and I anytime. So let's start. Rachel, thank you so much for taking the time. It's 6:00 in the UK. Thank you so much for having dinner with us.
You're very welcome. I don't even think I've got an accent, so that's really funny.
Okay.
You are the people with accents.
Exactly.
That's really normal to me, so that's
so
quite
tell
funny.
us what happened. I mean, like long COVID has just become a drama. I mean, there are doctors who are now long COVID doctors. There are hospitals with departments for long COVID. Like, what happened that people got a bad flu and then, didn't get better from the flu? Can you share like what was going on in your life? Give us a timeline of exactly what was happening for you and how you recovered.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in order for me to talk about my journey, I have to go back pre-COVID. And I didn't realize this at the time, but in kind of unpicking and in my recovery, it's been a journey of kind of then going back to what was happening during the pandemic, but also what was happening to me before the pandemic. So pre-COVID, as I like to call it, or before BC, before COVID, my life was really busy. I worked full time. I ran my own business. I was living in one city, but working in another city, single parent. So looking after my daughter. I like to run. I was training for a marathon. I like to travel. And my life was full of saying yes and feeling the fear and doing it anyway. Looking back, I thought that I was really confident. And I think I was in terms of the things that I did. But looking back, there probably was a level of anxiety because I remember traveling to London thinking, have I booked the babysitter? Have I got the overnight childcare? How am I going to continue to do this? And I never really switched off.
So go ahead. You weren't switching off. You were doing 1,000 things.
Yeah.
You were taking care of everybody and maybe not yourself. Then what happened?
So then what happened was we had the pandemic and I took it a little bit in my stride, but I lost all my work. You've now frozen on me.
Okay, just keep talking. Keep talking.
Okay, so then we had the pandemic and basically all my work got cancelled. I run workshops and everything overnight got cancelled. I found myself homeschooling. I felt like I took it in my stride, but actually there was quite a lot of anger because I wasn't being paid. I was worried in terms of bills. I have some rental properties and the tenants stopped paying rents. So there were lots of things that were then going on. But I thought I kind of took it in my strides. And then December 2020, I got COVID. And how it happened was that my daughter got it from her dad. He had it first. And I'd been incredibly careful, but she went to stay with him. We're not together. She came back, and then he told me that he had it, and then she got it. And honestly, when I look back, the fear that I had in terms of the fact that she'd got it and I was waiting to get it, but also the shame that I felt because I sent her to school kind of knowing that there might be something, but in denial, knowing that I had to work. And then she came back positive, and then I came back positive. But then what happened was the whole school had to shut down because they had to isolate because of us. And honestly, the guilt that I felt because of
Talk
that.
about feeling guilty.
Oh my God. And I don't think I realised at the time, but it was my greatest fear that I would be the parent that would shut down the school. And then we're on a WhatsApp, and every day there were more and more people saying that they got COVID, and people that were in hospital, and my daughter's dad had antibiotics.
Rachel, you gave it to the entire country.
But basically, I gave it to the entire country.
I learned from Rose and a couple of psychologists that we interviewed in Australia that guilt is you're trying to do something right. Guilt comes from a place of doing something good. So it's an interesting, different side of it, because sometimes it can be about the anger or the fear, but it all comes back to we're all trying the best we can to do the best we can. So interesting. So you felt very guilty. Then
So
your daughter had COVID. Then what happened?
So then my daughter actually was, just had a few symptoms. I didn't have anything that was any worse than the flu, really. But the only thing that I did have was that when I was on a work call, I had what I thought was neurological symptoms. I had this kind of sudden flash of it was like derealization. It just felt really neurological. And actually, I recognised it from about 10 years before, when I thought I was going to die in a scuba diving accident. So it was actually
like a disassociation.
So it was like a disassociation, basically. And I thought it was a symptom. What I now realise was that it wasn't a symptom at all. It was actually fear. But I somehow managed to carry on. I ran a workshop for the weekend, even though I knew I had COVID. And then I decided to cancel work. And actually, we had quite a nice time then. It was over Christmas. We kind of just it was just me and my daughter.
You're having COVID, or you're just around people with COVID?
Well, it was just me and my daughter isolated in the house. So I was working, running Zoom workshops. So I carried on running workshops for a bit. But then I made the decision to cancel work. And then I had quite a nice time. We had 10 days isolated. We had Deliveroo came and delivered different food for us. We watched loads of movies together. And I kind of thought, oh, I've got away with it. That's it. It's all right. And I actually put a post on Facebook saying, I've had COVID, but it's all right. And I went back to normal. It was Christmas. I drank a bit. I went running. I thought, that's it. I was quite glad I'd got COVID. I'd got it over and done with and lived to tell the tale. But interestingly, when I look back, there were a few things in that, as you start to unpick the story, probably didn't help. One was that my boyfriend at the time, it was quite a dysfunctional relationship, but my boyfriend at the time said to me, I've just read a story of someone that recovered. And then a few days later, he got worse. At the same time, my mum said to me, make sure you don't run because you might get post-viral fatigue. And another thing that I only realised recently was when I put the Facebook post up, a lot of people had come back with horror stories of things that had happened to them. But I didn't kind of click that at the time. I went back to life, back to work. And then about 10 days after I'd recovered, I suddenly realised I'd been sleeping a bit much. I didn't feel that great. I had brain fog. I was on a client call that I don't know how I went through it because I realised I couldn't think. I didn't really connect.
That's so scary. It's like you're tripping. It's like a trip.
Yeah, it was like I wasn't there. I was having these conversations, but I wasn't there. Then just this awful fatigue. I remember ringing my partner at the time saying, you've got to go and pick up my daughter because I don't think I'm going to make it. And yeah, and then after a week, I felt okay again. I slept a bit, I felt okay again. And then I kind of entered this boom and bust cycle, as I now know it's called, where I'd be all right for a week. Then I'd be absolutely horrendously fatigued. I mean, I remember sleeping for 3 days solid, pretty much. dizzy, feeling nauseous, brain fog, pins and needles all over me, burning back, you name it, a tight throat at some point that I Googled, and then it came up with COVID strangle. So, which sent me into more fear. So this kind of went on. And I convinced myself it's because I'd run. I convinced myself that I had done it to myself. And my partner at the time was going, you should get off your bike, you should stop running, you need to rest. And then other people were saying, oh, it's because I had run, and that there were newspapers saying that you shouldn't exercise. And at some point mid-February, it stopped being boom and bust, and it was just bust. And at about the same time, I went on, two things happened, actually. I went on a fatigue course, and that's probably the worst thing I could have done. It was run by someone that had had ME for 7 years, and she told me that I had to accept it. She told me about pacing, and I said, but I've got work next week. And she said, you do not want to be working. You won't be capable of that. So I cancelled the work. And then she told me to anticipate symptoms. And she said, look out for something called tuning signals. And I said, well, the first thing that happens to me is I get this anxiety. And she said, when that happens, go to bed. And I mentioned this on a long COVID group. I said, what happens when you get those first symptoms? And they went, there's nothing you can do. You've got to go and sit in a dark room. And so that's what I did, because I thought that later on I realized that it wasn't anticipatory. It was actually just a sign of literally anxiety. And my response to that was actually what caused the bust. But at the time I thought there was nothing I could do, and that when I got it, then I could try and minimize what happened next by lying in a dark room, basically.
How many days or months did this kind of go on before you started to understand that recovery was possible? Because you were now meeting the wrong people.
Right, okay. I mean, they call it get out of the bad neighbourhoods, don't they? That's what I think Dan Buglio talks about. I like that phrase. I mean, luckily also, at the same time, I met, so I put a Facebook group out to my friends, and some of them said, can you still hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. Some of them had actually had ME, I hadn't realised, and had recovered. And I instinctively knew, I'm an NLP trainer, I instinctively knew that if you want to do something well, you've got to look for the people that have done it before you. You've got to model what they do, not the bad people. So I then went onto a COVID Facebook group and I said, does anyone recover? And no one answered me.
Oh my God.
Oh.
So there's this fear, but then I wasn't suicidal, but I was as close as I have ever got to it. I felt like I was in this pit. I felt like I was trying to climb out of this pit. I felt like I wasn't getting anywhere. I used to wake up in the mornings and think, what's happened to my life? And for a moment I'd kind of wake up happy, and then I'd remember that I didn't have my old life. I'd ring my poor old mum on a daily basis, telling her how awful it was, which she later told me was horrendous. But actually, she was really good. She was like, well, you've got to accept what's going on for now, and you will get better. And she just kept saying, you will get better. Other people have got better. You will find a way. But let's just kind of accept it. And then there were these turning points. And for me, most of the turning points, some were techniques, but a lot were kind of insights, things that I read, things that I heard that just made sense. So one of the first things that happened was that I kept cancelling work, but I'd cancel for a week, and then I'd do a bit of work, and I'd cancel, and then I'd do a bit. And every time I cancelled, I felt a little bit better just from the cancelling. And every time I went nearer and nearer to a work piece, I would feel worse. And I rang my mum and I said, this is like really ridiculous. What a coincidence that every time I cancel work, I feel better. And we both stopped and drew a breath and just went, this is not coincidence. There is something going on here. We don't know what it is, but there's something around stress and the stress response that is driving this. And we didn't know any more than that. There wasn't anything about long COVID. but it was a key defining moment. Um,
And what
so
was your relationship, Rachel, with work? Like, were you really enjoying the work at this time? Was it, yeah, too
Well,
much?
that's the thing. So I work as a coach and I work as a trainer, and so I would always get some performance anxiety, but I kind of, deal with it. But also overlaid with that was the anxiety of being self-employed. So when you get feedback, you're worrying about, will they book you again? You're worrying about the feedback in terms of what does that say about you? Will they book? So I think I was living in fear and in high alert in terms of making sure that everything was all right for clients, and what if they rang me and something changed, and what if and so I was living with quite a lot of what ifs. And if you'd have asked me at the time, I would have said that that was all about pre-planning and being really detailed, and that was why I was really good at what I did. But actually it probably had some consequences on me, and also just some patterns that I was then living with, where I'd learned to live in this high alert state, waiting for the phone to ring and waiting for, for something to go wrong that I needed to sort.
Do you think you're,
So,
oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
go on.
Yeah, Jeannie. No,
First
no,
of
go
all,
ahead.
can you clarify what kind of coach? Because was it a personal trainer or was it a health
No,
coach?
so I work as a leadership trainer. So I run my own business. I work running leadership courses
Leadership. Okay.
around presentation and management and leadership. So I incorporate quite a lot of things around NLP, and then
Yeah.
sometimes I'll do some one-on-one coaching, like with corporates or within the NHS. I do some work.
Yeah.
So it's important that, your work, especially being self-employed, responsible, you were like, your identity is really wrapped up in it. And so
Hugely.
that's really important that was being questioned, and then our ego. And this is a very important thing for a lot of us. And the shame, the guilt, the feeling. So all these things were going on. So
Yeah.
then what happened? Then what happened when you and your mom realized that? Then what happened?
That's such a good point, just going back to that, because you're absolutely right. You've got me. I thought I was superwoman and I needed to keep work going and be a single parent and do both of those things in the middle of a pandemic.
It kind of goes back to the control too, right?
Yeah,
Where having to
huge. That was part of the
surrender.
goal.
Yeah. But I do agree. And it is very difficult. Well, here's what I'll say too is, being a single mom, and Tova and I know both about like having your own business and the ups and downs and, the stress. Gosh, I had a good point. Hold on. Give me one.
Yeah, no,
Take
it's
that
that, isn't
Oh, I
it?
just think like, yeah, just like how, like the control piece and doing everything with this hustle mentality, right? I mean, the culture, we're in all different countries and the message is the same. Hustle, work hard. And Tova and I have talked about we can't hustle our way out of pain. We can't hustle in healing. So it's this shift. Hustle has made us successful in our business, and as a single mom, it's a lot of masculine energy too. So I think that's a huge shift that
Yeah,
we don't really know how to do as like very accomplished women.
Go ahead.
absolutely.
So did your mom realize there's a stress piece, and then what got you into the neuroplastic world? What drew you into meeting the people that we studied with? Like, how did you? Because I would have never met you if you hadn't been kind of like, because tons of people are getting long COVID and healing, but I'm not meeting them because they're not healing through neuroplasticity. They're healing through other things, but we weren't worlds together until recently. So what drew you to Howard
So
Schubiner and things like that?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, first I did the Gupta program actually, and I recognised what he was saying because it was not dissimilar to some things that I'd heard in NLP, and it made sense that this was my nervous system. He specifically talked about, are you thinking that it's permanent, it's forever, that you're worrying about every symptom, that you think you'll never recover? And I thought, wow, he knows me personally. And that really clicked. I listened to one module, which was all about the thinking patterns and the fear of the symptoms. I'm a biochemist, so I kind of understand basic biology, and the biology around how a virus works and how your brain creates symptoms to keep you safe made sense, and how the nervous system could be stuck. So that was a turning point. I outsourced everything and I decided that I was going to learn my way out of this. And the first piece was just mindset. I was like, if I'm going to recover, I need to sort my mindset out. My partner at the time told me I needed to be more positive because I was in victim mode. I nearly hit him.
Not helpful.
He had a point. And I managed to I read a book about Christopher Reeve, Superman, and how he came back from being paralyzed. I read a book called The Wintering by Catherine Ray, and I realized that this was a phase in my life. And somewhere in there, I realized that I would recover. I made a decision, a very clear decision, that I was going to recover and I was going to help people and I was going to tell my story. And I remember it really clearly, just this moment. Someone posted a Nicole Sachs podcast, and it was a lady called Lika. She had recovered from long COVID. It's the first person I knew that had done that, or I listened to that had done that. And I thought, well, if she can, I can. It doesn't matter if there's just one person. That means it's possible. And then I started binging on Nicole Sachs. I read 3 podcasts that were brilliant for Nicole Sachs that changed everything. One was called Relapse is Part of the Healing Process. And I realized that it was possible to have setbacks, but your reaction to the setback mattered more than the setback. And that there was learning. There was going to be learning from every single setback. And there was. And so you can't, so that helped. She did one, I don't know if you listened, called Pre-Grieving. And it's amazing. And she basically went, it's not the event that happens that's the problem. Often people crash before the event. And I'd just done a work piece and I'd crashed a couple of days before the work piece, nothing to do with the work. And she said it's called pre-grieving, where you anticipate the fact that you're so desperate to be well for an event that you spend hours and hours and hours worrying about whether you're going to be well for the event. And so that anxiety puts you back into the stress mode.
Wow, that's yeah, like you're not in the moment, you're in the past or the future. You're totally not. And the brain is completely protecting you, like red alert, red alert.
Yeah, 100%. And I always thought mindfulness was eating raisins really slowly and looking at them. I poo-pooed that. I didn't really get it.
Wait a second, stop. Mindfulness is eating raisins slowly. This is important. I'm going to share that with all my clients. Tell us more of your witchcraft.
Exactly, I know. Someone sent me an Eckhart Tolle book when I first got ill, and I was just really, really I didn't understand why they would be doing that when I had long COVID.
Yeah, so I'm going to stop here and say, okay, Rachel, you're in your head, you're reading all these books, you're talking to these people, so you're up here, but did you have a need to go down to your unconscious mind and get to your feeling? Was that something you had to do? Did you have to connect to some deeper core feelings?
Well, so I then started journaling, and I didn't really understand why I was journaling. I was just prepared to try everything. So I made my 3 lists that Nicole talks about: past, present, and personality traits. And I'm familiar with the personality traits, and I bought into that really quickly. But as I was journaling, and I just used an iPad and I was writing, suddenly from nowhere, and I wasn't even expecting it, came back, you are not good enough. You are not good enough. And I didn't really connect up, but you are not good enough and fear were the 2 things that just kept coming up. So I wouldn't say that was totally my story, or but it's all part of the jigsaw, isn't it? It's all part of the jigsaw that you start putting these pieces together as to what might be happening. And I mean, another piece of the jigsaw was I saw a breathing physio. I literally was prepared to try everything. I was taking every supplement. I don't think they worked, but I wasn't prepared to stop just in case. But I saw a breathing physio, and it was the first time that I thought, I have control, I have influence. And she said, Rachel, are you a mouth breather? And I said, no, I don't think so. And then we're on Zoom, and I saw myself take the biggest gulp ever. And she timed me, and I was 26 breaths a minute. I was hyperventilating.
Wow. Interesting. Living on 5th gear.
So part of that, I think, was the panic in terms of COVID. I don't know what I was like pre-COVID, whether I was also shallowly breathing. I suspect possibly this had definitely made it worse, but it gave me a tangible thing to do every day that started to put some structure into my life. And I bought a hot tub. I sat in my garden. I read. My mindset was better. I did breathing exercises. And really importantly, actually, I read some stuff about pain and about getting well, but I also actually just read some stuff that was enjoyable. I didn't spend all my time thinking about being ill.
I hope you watch some funny movies.
And I remember the first time I laughed. And I've since watched the film, and it wasn't even a funny film. It was a Simon Pegg film, but I remember very clearly laughing. And I told everyone it was funny, and they watched it and they went, "It's not." But I realized in that moment I hadn't laughed for months. So that was
I just want to bring up, I want to interrupt you, and I'm sorry, but then I'm going to have you speak. But, this may be something I'll talk about when we meet with Dr. David Hanscom again. But he was one of the first doctors who talks about play. And we forget, I mean, this is serious shit, being in pain and being sick, but we forget how play tricks the brain. This is a brain. We're having a relationship with a brain, not a person. Not like a dictator, but the brain is a piece of flesh. It's a lizard brain. It's programmed, and we can fake it till we make it and laugh. And that's what Norman Cousins did when he laughed his way out of ankylosing spondylitis. So this is a very important thing about play. You got a hot tub. Go ahead. What else? Go ahead.
So I sat in nature. I mean, I outsourced everything that I had to do. Like, my friends were picking my daughter up from school and dropping her off. So I didn't have any have-tos. But, and this is really key, I think also, I had to keep a baseline. At one point, I was so ill, I thought, I'm going to go to my parents. They can look after me. But I couldn't work out how to get there. I couldn't work out how I would walk from the train station car park to the train, because it was too far, because it was down some steps. So I didn't. But that was so important, I think, because it meant that I had to get my daughter up in the morning. And I had to then be there in the afternoon. And so it was it kept my baseline just a little bit functioning. It gave me some purpose, and it gave me a marker. So for the first kind of couple of months, we were on Deliveroo. We ate a lot of takeaways. It cost me a fortune. But then slowly I started to be able to do a bit more, and I was able to see that function. And that was really important. And my mum kept telling me, "You're getting better. I can see you're getting better." And I diarised some of the things that I was able to do. I tried to achieve something every day, however small. And I think that is really important. Someone on a Facebook group very early on said to me, "Rachel, fatigue is a really interesting thing. You won't necessarily get rid of the fatigue by sleeping. If you sleep too much, you actually encourage the fatigue. So it's a balance. It's about getting rest, but it's and since then, because I now work with coffee and lots of scientists, I have come to the conclusion that fatigue is actually a feeling created in the brain to keep you safe, and that is all it.
Talk about this for a minute. So, did you experience that with your chronic fatigue?
Resting did nothing. I mean, I was on disability. I rested, and the doctor tells me I have Epstein-Barr and adrenal burnout, which just sounds I'm damaged, and the blood, the levels and the inflammation markers. And I mean, I think the resting, I talk about how I got better from chronic fatigue when I went back to work full time, and then it went away. I mean, I've shared how I was sleeping, I was resting on my break in the break room on a couch. But I think that's interesting too, in like purpose. I think I started thinking about exiting teaching. Like there was something, and I think you're right. Like the fatigue is, I didn't want to, I didn't want it. It's interesting for me. I didn't want to go to work, but then looking at work as just a means to the end. When I switched it of like, here I am, I'm going to do this year, whatever, and then get my coaching certificate, get out of here, right? Then it was fine. But I think just like, I knew I didn't want to be there. And so my mind body's like, you don't want to work. So let's, and then when you switch it and you see what's possible, the rest did nothing for me.
I wonder also if it's really, you made a point there when you're talking about your family. And I wonder how it is, because there are so many mothers that we're meeting with chronic pain and autoimmune disease, and the whole relationship with taking care of their children and taking care of their responsibilities, and how do they take care of themselves? Like, how do you manage? how do you juggle that? You know, where Jeannie was responsible for a classroom and children. I mean, she didn't have her own children, but you had a single child, and even though you had a mother, and then people can have a husband. But how do we come to terms with taking care of ourselves? Like, can you talk a little bit about that for some of the mothers out there, and how can they juggle it all and still like make themselves number one, which really has to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I outsourced everything that I could. I asked for help. I never asked for help. And some friends volunteered as well. So my friends sent me food vouchers. I mean, my friends took my daughter to school. I went to bed at the same time as my daughter. We co-slept because that just felt like the easiest thing. I hired a cleaner. I mean, you know, there's a certain privilege in terms of I had some savings that I was able to do that. And I had some friends. And honestly, my mum was the most amazing person that I rang every day. It was the pandemic, so I couldn't see her. But I would literally pick up the phone. And we got to a point where she knew that if she kept me talking for long enough, she could kind of calm me down. And then she would say at the end, Rachel, you're actually in a better state now than you were at the beginning. What's going on there? So I started to then, when I didn't feel so good, I'd reach for the phone and I would get reassurance there. Going back to work,
going back to work, just definitely
a positive.
I just want to make a good, sorry to interrupt you, but like, this is a really good point about the isolation, because we all have, and it's a good point of everyone has challenges. Like with me, I was living alone. That's challenging. But then also it's so challenging when you have a husband and then you're relying on that person or your mom, or like we all face these like unique challenges. But I think there's something really important, Rachel, about asking for help and you know, the shame, all that can come up with that. But there's just different flavors of people who have a family. And so they have lots of help at home, but then that can just be so many emotions come up with that intense guilt with being sick. And it's my fault that I'm sick. So sorry to interrupt, but that was a good point.
No, absolutely. And I mean, I think, that's right, isn't it? I mean, my partner wasn't living with me at the time. The relationship wasn't that functional anyway. So I'm probably quite glad about that. I think the other thing that I did that really helped was I would invite friends round, and I would invite them round for really small amounts of time. And it was in the pandemic, so that kind of felt appropriate anyway. But and I'd end up inviting them around for an hour, and I'd say, after an hour, I'm going to be really fatigued. So you've only got an hour. And at the time, I didn't know about predictive coding, but lo and behold,
law of attraction.
But then you realise that in the pandemic, no one's used to anyone. So my friends were actually also exhausted after an hour. And it's quite normal if you haven't been socialising. What are you going to talk about? You've got nothing to talk about. So then I started realising that actually fatigue after an hour was actually normal and wasn't anything to do with the illness. Or do you know what I mean? You stop realising what is normal. It's like someone yesterday was saying when they go out in the sun the next day, they feel like they're going to crash. And I'm like, to be honest, I've been recovered 4 years. When I go out in the sun all day, I feel exhausted and hot and bothered as well. We forget sometimes what's the condition and what is actually just the human experience.
And also what you're talking about is something very important, is people are still in fear and creating the future they don't want. And because it's this quantum work that we all have been studying, and I really dive into it, that the worry about something in the future and the fact that you can create it or not. Mental rehearsal, we talked about with Dr. Brad Fanistill last time we were with him together, Jeannie, and how we have to rehearse. And Joe Dispenza talks about this. We have to rehearse what we want to look like. How do we want to be on that vacation? How do we want to be in that new job? And is it okay that we don't be who we want to be, that we do the best we can? Like, I'm always like, if you imagine you're going to be okay and you're not, then you get to forgive yourself and try it again tomorrow. This is not black and white. This is many shades of gray. This is
that's a gray that just came up this week with me with clients. That's just a huge, we could do a whole show on that, Tovah, right? Of just, and the meaning of things, right?
Yeah, the power we give our thoughts. I mean, I can't, with everyone I talk to, like I do some discovery calls. I may never work with the person, but I always do the Byron Katie work. And I was
Yeah.
like, is that thought true? Well,
Yeah.
no. And who or what would you be without that thought? Well, I can't
God.
even imagine. I can't even
Yeah.
imagine. Well, I'd be free. Well, freedom is an interesting thing. And how does it feel to be free? Well, I don't know if I'd be comfortable being free. And let's turn that thought around. Well, what if I didn't have that thought? What if I had the opposite thought? Well, that's pretty scary. And I haven't mentioned this in a long time. I mean people who get rid of their pain, their symptoms, and they're hanging out with their feelings and they want their pain back.
Mm.
Yeah.
So we and Hanscom talks a lot about we're not prepared for mental we don't have the mental capacity, we don't have a capacity to handle mental strain. We can handle physical strain. We're good at that. We get sick, we get better, we take this. But mental anguish and mental depth and intensity, we want to stuff it. We want to smoke a joint. We want to run. We want to go do some push-ups. We don't want to be with our feelings. And this still
Yeah.
sounds a little woo-woo to me, but this is the science. This is the science. So let's talk a little bit about your fear, your anger, your living in fifth gear. Like what intense energy and how you calm down, how your mom helped you calm down in those conversations, how people, even hyper like me and Jeannie, find ourselves calming down. And how do we help people to find that calm place in them? How do we help people with that, Rachel?
I mean, I actually kind of started to think that it was an opportunity. I thought of this as an opportunity to strip my life right back, that maybe it hadn't been quite as good as I'd thought through the journaling. And then I was going to slowly put pieces together. What was important? Work was important. So I started with 2 hours of work. And I managed to get through that and then built up. My daughter was clearly important, being able to look after her. Friends were important. And then the last piece was exercise. And for some reason, I thought I was exercise intolerant. And then I tried a bike ride, which now sounds ridiculous, where I freewheeled for 10 minutes on my bike. My heart rate didn't.
What, like 3 wheels?
Freewheeled, like I didn't even pedal. I just sat on my bike and went for 10
Great
minutes
idea.
on the flats. Thought that'd be good.
Casual exposure.
Wow, but 24 hours later, I got symptoms. Obviously, of course I would, because I was expecting them. I didn't pick up my bike for months after that because I was full of fear. We know this, right? It's the predictive code. So anyway, then I booked to do the lightning process, which is a course with Phil Parker, and it was the biggest paradigm shift.
Wow.
Probably of my life. So I'm sat here as I'm talking to you. It's 2 hours in. We've been talking about lots of things that we talk about in the GUPTA program as well. And then I said, of course I have to pace, and of course I can't exercise. And it was Phil Parker's sister actually was doing the course, and she went, "What do you mean you have to pace, Rachel?" I said, "Well, I have to pace. I've been told to pace. I have to count every activity. I can't go over 10 minutes." And she said, "You have as much energy as anybody else. You do not need to pace, but it's like you've got this leaking bucket where your expectations and your worry and your fear in terms of, going over these limits that you've put on yourself are the things that are actually causing the symptoms." I nearly fell off my chair. But in that moment, I believed her. And it was because it's like the Byron Katie thing where I realized that there were discrepancies. Like I could walk in the house. I could walk all day in the house. But if I left my house and walked 10 minutes, I couldn't. So there were things that didn't add up. There were things that didn't really add up about the bike rides, but I was too scared to confront that. So I went on my bike. I decided I was going to go for broke. What I thought she would be able to do anyway, but I thought I'm going to get on my bike. I'm going to cycle for 30 minutes. I'm going to get my heart rate up to as high as it possibly can go. I think I did 180, and I'm going to see what happens. About 6, I wouldn't necessarily, I had so much belief at this point. It was such a shift. The world was suddenly round. It wasn't flat. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. My idea before that was just to go a bit slowly and gradual exposure, which is probably more friendly, right? But
Well,
anyway,
I'm going to interrupt you. I'm going to slow you down. Take a
yeah.
breath. Eat a raisin.
Look at the raisin.
This is such an important key because there are a number of stories that I have on my broadcast where people were ready for surgery and
Yeah.
they read part of Sarno's book and they went out for a run. And I'm like, this is also a mindset and a decision. And I am the placebo, and they probably were in discomfort, but they shifted something. Something shifted. And of course, we're not here to recommend things. We're not diagnosing. We're simply educating and talking about experiences. But nothing was different. You went out for that bike ride than when you did the whatever you did before with the bike. Like nothing was different, but you made a decision.
I made a decision. I made a decision that I needed to test it, and I was on this 3-day course, and I was going to get the most out of it, and the coach could rescue me if it all went wrong. I don't know how I thought she could do that.
And that was a complete trust, right, Jeannie? A complete trust in your body that you could handle whatever happens. That whatever happens, a crash, a flare, that you were going to be okay.
So see what then happens. That wasn't the end of the story. About 6 hours later, I had the worst symptoms I've ever had, but I knew what they were.
Yeah,
I knew what they were.
I think this is important too.
I faced the fear. It was literally like I was in a film, like some kind of hero's journey. I knew they were coming. I was kind of looking for them. I faced the fear. I had the ring. I was Frodo. I needed to go through the fire, and somehow, and it took every ounce of strength, somehow I kind of stuck with it and knew what it was and looked at it. I don't know. And then I went to the pub and had a beer, which I hadn't done for months, just to distract. And then when I was distracted, it went, and I knew I'd won. I knew that it wasn't necessarily the end, and it wasn't, but I knew that I had found a key, a missing piece, so I came back with the ring.
What were you going to say, Jeannie?
I was going to say, this is such a beautiful story of highlighting how everyone's journey is different. I think the mistake some people can make is, I have to do it the way Jeannie did it. I have to do it the way Rachel did it. Rachel did it this way. I did it. That's not true. You do it the way it's going to work for you, and you can do it gradually, or you could, right? I just think it really highlights, we keep saying this over and over. There's, your journey is going to be unique. There's not the right way, the one way, because we get all this fear that if I don't do it like that. So I just kind of want to highlight how, and just like I did, I made a decision. I'm going back to work. And I think there's a lot of, intention behind it. And I always joke with Tovah, I was a high school teacher, when you go back to high school, I had a lot of victimhood when I was alone all day in my house. And for me, I couldn't have those thoughts because the kids don't let you let me just sit here. No, they're like in your face. So anyway, I just wanted to so beautifully.
Yeah, very nice.
Hi.
Very nice. So basically, what else did you, Rachel, what else? So you felt the fear and did it anyway. You went ahead and went back to exercise. This is one of Sarno's things. Go back to your regular, and the gradual exposure, which is what Alan Gordon talks about. And you obviously were journaling, and you were dealing with your feelings. And the thing about work, you really came to terms with, because your ego wasn't wrapped up in it. You were able to have a little less fear about finances and making a living, and you had this better relationship with your work. So it looks like you covered a lot of fronts there. Was there anything else there regarding compassion for self or love of self that maybe, because other people might, did you hate your body? Did you think your body was against you? Did you think your body was attacking you? What was your relationship with your body at the time?
Well, so that's, I told my story, I videoed myself, and I told my story up to that, and I sent it out on internet, and I sent it out to lots of Facebook groups, and somebody said, wait for it, Rachel. It's early days, wait for the crash. And about 10 days later, I felt the familiar fatigue. I was convinced that I'd got it wrong. I'm back in the pits. Luckily, I rang the lightning process woman and I said, "It's not worked. Why have you done this to me? I wish I hadn't done it." And she said, "Oh, where are those beliefs?" And somehow I managed to pull myself out. So it's never the end. There were a series of these wobbles that lasted for months, but each one was a bit less. I feel like it's stepping stones out. But then what happened is I had the symptom imperative. I had IBS that was so bad that my stomach was so distended, and then I had panic attacks. And then I realized that there was still work to be done. And that work was the emotional piece, and it was the compassion piece. And I went back to journaling, and I went back to Nicole Sachs. And I kept getting these different symptoms, and I was like, what is it that I still need to learn? And I started to understand that control was a big piece that you mentioned. It's really intuitive that you mentioned earlier on, and that I was really hard on myself and wasn't very compassionate. And so, I'm still on the journey 4 years on, because I never want to get back there. So it's always a journey, isn't it? Rather than a destination. But
Yeah.
Well, this was worth the interruptions in the beginning. And I hope that when it comes up on the recording on the YouTube channel, people really hear your story. It is just inspiring, and it's not like it was pretty the whole time. It was like, there was lots of deep dives, and so I am really happy that Jeannie and I got to meet you and see that. And it's not like people get stuck when they're like, I need to get better and I need to be like this. Like, I see you as a control freak, and you're looking at two other ones right here, but you also eating raisins, whatever, meditating on raisins. But what I'm saying is that you were able, because we can be a control freak and not have physical symptoms. But we have to own that and love that and accept that part of us and know how we got control, because somehow in our life, someone took it from us. We're not blaming parents here, but somehow you were able to live in fifth gear. You're still in fifth gear, but you're not symptomatic. So see how you had to break the habit of being yourself, but evolve and still be Rachel, still have the essence of who you are. So I'm thrilled. And the handful of long COVID stories that we've been listening to is really, this is such a unique one, because it's you, Rachel. It's like you.
Yeah, I mean, there's a great Nicole Sachs quote, and she's like, "Are you doing things through the lens of love or fear? Which are you doing?" And it's actually then not about what you're doing, but how you're doing it, and how you're treating yourself, and how you're thinking about yourself and the activities. So you can do exactly, I now run ultramarathons. I mean, they're only just over a marathon. but so you can go back to all of that, but I'm not doing it in the same. The motivation has changed. I'm not doing it to kind of beat myself up or, to try and achieve something. I'm doing it just for the love of the fact that I really like running the trails. There's a different mentality to it all. Work, I'm much more just in the moment. And if something happens, I just name it and I'm all right with it. And if someone doesn't like me, that's okay. So I've changed in terms of how I treat myself, I guess, or how I view myself.
Very important. As Michael Galinsky says, it really just comes down to you. And you have a disease called being human, and you're inviting that, and you're inviting that. It's not a disease. I don't like the word disease. You have this experience with yourself. I think all illness that's recovering isn't a true genie, that people are meeting themselves. So you met Rachel.
Yeah.
And welcome to the TMS Roundtable, Rachel. What a ride tonight. What a ride. Well, listen, it's at the hour. So I'm really happy we covered all fronts, and you got that emotional piece and that self-compassion. So give yourself a hug. Oh my God, I'm so happy to meet you. Jeannie, you want to say anything profound? You know it says profound things.
Oh. I actually don't want to say something profound. I just want to highlight, because I know our people, Tovah, I know you know our people. Ultramarathons and triathlons. People always want to know the results. Where are you now? So I want to just highlight that. We mentioned that when you were like off camera, but really people want to know where you are now, and just ultra marathons, triathlons, runs, cycles, and travels, and yay.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'd maybe have a little bit more downtime, and I'm maybe not as fast, but that's the motivation, nothing else.
The hot tub.
And the hot tub actually got a puncture, and then another puncture, and another puncture, so it no longer exists. But it served its purpose.
Yeah.
Amazing. No, and you have a lovely sense of humor. You have a lovely sense of humor. You're really just a light. And you just brought light to this studio, and I think I'm really happy. I'm really happy with the internet, and it worked out that your street decided to plug in the internet.
Well, I'm still spotting, actually. Thank you, mobile.
I'm really happy we adapted. This is like the real thing. This is not like, like CBS or this is just like the real thing with Tovah and Jeannie. So I am so happy. It's been a hard week in my country, and I'm just so happy to have a Thursday night with you. Really, really, you're just like, you're better than like a glass of wine. You're amazing. You're so adorable. You are adorable. You're really special. You're sweet. You're funny, Rachel. And, I'm really excited. And anything I didn't ask her, I'm going to ask. So if anybody out there in the studio wants to ask a question, we're going to round up in a few minutes. That's number one. Two, it will be uploaded to the TMS Roundtable tomorrow, the next day. Jeannie's always available. Her information is on the description. Rachel, I'm going to get your Facebook page, and people can reach out to you if people have any questions. Is that okay?
I'm pretty easy to find. I moderate on Raylan's channel, as most people know, and co-chair of the coffee consumer group. So I'm quite.
Take a minute and talk about the coffee consumer. What is you mentioned this coffee? What is that again?
Yeah, well, coffee has been going 10 years, and it's a collaboration of scientists from across the world who research on post-infection fatigue. And some of them are, mind-body, but there's also people that are interested in genetics and the biochemistry. So a whole range of science. What's important is the science. And then we're the consumer arm, which is basically a group of patients, some recovered, some not, who give feedback on the research and feedback on the trials. But we've also been hosting some seminars, getting doctors and patients and scientists together, a bit like we're doing now, in a live audience. So there's a few videos out there that have really helped people. Like, people have literally said to me, they've watched the video and they've recovered. I've had pictures of people riding their bikes saying, all we needed was that video. It's lovely, isn't it? I'm sure you've had that.
We are healing people symptom by symptom, breath by breath.
Exactly. One time.
Like I always say, it's not even probable. It's just possible. It's probable. It's possible. It's not even, I don't even want to put the word possible. It's happening. You are healing, and it is a journey. And I think what we can leave people with is patience, a sense of humor. I mean, like, sometimes we have to lighten the up. And compassion. And so, Rachel, thank you so much for spending your evening with us. Jeannie, I love you, and have a great rest of the day. We'll see you in a few weeks with the next guest. Have a wonderful night, and thank you to our listeners, and see you next week. All the best. God bless.
Take care.